They judged him by the threadbare collar of his overcoat and dismissed him as a nonentity. The loud, high-octane financiers at table 4 openly ridiculed him. The manager, concerned about appearances, tried to shuffle him into an obscure corner, and the world, meaning the exclusive transactional ecosystem of midtown dining, simply wrote him off. They were convinced he was merely a befuddled, elderly French tourist, too obtuse to comprehend the cruelty of their privileged snubs. But they committed one fundamental, catastrophic miscalculation. They failed to realize that the quiet girl pouring their chilled water, Chloe, harbored a deep, complicated history rooted in the cobblestone streets of Paris. And they certainly had no idea that the man they so carelessly ignored was Jean-Luc Valois, the reclusive titan whose signature was required to approve, or utterly destroy, their company's most critical acquisition. When the marginalized waitress finally broke the tense silence, speaking up in a French so pure and effortless it resonated like a church bell, the stillness that fell over the dining room wasn't merely awkward. It was breathtakingly, catastrophically expensive. This is the narrative of how a single act of quiet compassion brought a monumentally toxic ego crashing down. The midday crush at L'Orenery, one of Manhattan's most unapologetically pretentious midtown establishments, was an endurance test, not a lunch service. It was a battlefield where the weapons were unlimited Amex black cards, and the casualties were inevitably the young, transient members of the waitstaff. Chloe Evans smoothed the front of her uniform, automatically trying to conceal the faint, lingering espresso stain on her cuff. At 26, she felt 76. Exhausted, depleted, and completely overlooked. That, precisely, was the nature of the job. You ceased to be a person. You were merely a vehicle, a silently gliding mechanism delivering sparkling water and ridiculously overpriced Cobb salads. "Excuse me, sweetheart. We've been sitting here for a solid 10 minutes waiting for the damn wine list." The voice didn't just speak. It boomed from the central banquette, cutting through the general buzz of status and deal-making. It belonged to Sterling Vance. Everyone who mattered knew Sterling. He was a newly promoted junior partner at Halloway and Finch, a predatory private equity firm located just steps down the street. He was 32, wore bespoke suits tailored in London that cost more than Chloe's decade-old Honda Civic, and carried the specific kind of entitled insolence that flourishes only when one has never once been told no. "I sincerely apologize, Mr. Vance," Chloe murmured, rushing to his side, her head slightly bowed, a practiced gesture of subservience. "The sommelier is currently tied up with the mayor's table, but I can check. I do not care if he is with the Pope and the entire College of Cardinals." Sterling snapped, his voice sharp enough to draw stares. He dramatically gestured toward the 3 other identical, pale young men at his table, his required entourage of junior analysts. "We are here discussing a billion-dollar merger. We require the 82 Margot, and we need it now." "I will see what I can immediately do," Chloe whispered, feeling the familiar prickle of heat rise on her neck as she retreated. As she pivoted to leave, she nearly stumbled into a man standing awkwardly close to the hostess's station. The hostess, a rigidly controlled woman named Jessica who dressed like she owned the restaurant and considered herself the ultimate gatekeeper of Manhattan's elite, was wholly ignoring him, meticulously typing into her iPad. The man looked intensely foreign to this environment. He was older, perhaps approaching his mid-60s, with windswept salt and pepper hair. His tweed jacket looked utterly comfortable but hopelessly out of date, and a soft wool scarf was loosely draped around his neck. He didn't appear destitute, but in a room saturated with Italian silk, polished leather, and Swiss chronometers, he looked heartbreakingly, tragically ordinary. "Excuse me," the man said softly. His voice was gravelly and carried a heavy, rolling accent. "I have a reservation under Valois." Jessica did not lift her gaze. "One moment, sir. I'm currently handling a priority VIP seating." The man stood patiently, clutching a worn leather notebook to his chest. He looked profoundly tired, like a decent grandfather waiting for a commuter bus, certainly not like a paying patron of L'Orenery. Chloe felt an instinctive pang of sympathy, a feeling she usually had to suppress to survive her shift. She knew exactly what it felt like to be stared through, She stepped around the bar area. "Jessica," she whispered, "that gentleman has been waiting right there for 5 minutes." Jessica finally rolled her eyes skyward, then looked up at the man with patent distaste. "Name?" "Valois," he repeated. "Jean-Luc." Jessica tapped a perfect, manicured nail against the screen. "I don't see a Valois. I have a Valo for a single diner at 1 p.m. She mangled the French pronunciation so badly it was physically jarring to Chloe's trained ear. "Yes," the man replied, nodding politely. "That would be me, right? Well, look, we're severely overbooked. The absolute only thing I have is table 9. Table 9 was notorious. The restaurant's designated penalty box. It was wedged right beside the constantly swinging kitchen doors and directly beneath a fiercely cold air conditioning vent. It was where management shunted the tourists or the undesirable patrons they wished to ensure never returned. "That will be perfectly fine," the man said quietly, although he instinctively tightened his scarf around his throat as he eyed the drafty, miserable corner. As he walked past Sterling Vance's prominent table toward his exile, Sterling let out a loud, aggressive bark of laughter. "Check out the coat," Sterling jeered, his voice projecting easily for half the establishment to hear. "Looks like he mugged a thrift store back in 1970. "Hey, Papy, the soup kitchen is 3 blocks down." The analysts surrounding Sterling erupted in a forced, sycophantic chorus of laughter. The older man froze instantly. He did not turn around, but his posture stiffened slightly, his grip on the leather notebook tightening until the veins stood out white on his knuckles. Then, with a quiet, heartbreaking dignity that went utterly unnoticed by the room's highflyers, he continued his path to the worst table near the clanging kitchen. A searing flush of anger spread across Chloe's neck. This wasn't just typical New York rudeness. It was calculated cruelty. She looked desperately toward the manager, Mr. Henderson, hoping he would step in and chastise Sterling. Henderson, however, was preoccupied, busy fawning over a local tech CEO, and pointedly averted his gaze. Sterling Vance dropped $10,000 a month here. The old man in the dated tweed coat might spend 50. In Henderson's cold calculus, the insult was perfectly permissible. Chloe grabbed a chilled pitcher of water. "I'll take table 9, she informed Jessica flatly. "Suit yourself," Jessica smirked, not looking up. "Don't hold your breath waiting for a tip. He looks like the type who counts his pennies." Chloe walked over to the small, slightly wobbly table near the aggressively noisy kitchen doors. The freezing air from the vent was already blasting down, stirring the man's gray hair. He was staring blankly at the oversized menu, but his eyes were distant, preoccupied. "Good afternoon, sir," Chloe said, forcing her warmest, most genuine smile into existence. She placed the water glass down with extreme gentleness, avoiding the typical rush hour slam used by the stressed servers. "My name is Chloe. I am truly sorry about this draft. If even a marginally better table opens up, I promise I will move you immediately." The man finally looked up. His eyes were a shocking, piercing blue, sharp, and deeply intelligent, completely contradicting his weary, simple demeanor. He looked at her name tag, then steadily up at her face. "Thank you, Chloe," he replied, articulating her name with the soft, distinct pronunciation of a native French speaker. "Please do not worry. I am accustomed to, how do you say, the cold shoulder?" He offered a small, sad, knowing smile. "Can I start you off with something to drink? A glass of wine, perhaps?" He hesitated, his gaze briefly snagging on the prohibitive prices listed on the oversized wine menu. "Just a coffee, please, black, and perhaps the onion soup." An excellent choice, Chloe instantly lied. The kitchen's onion soup was notoriously salty and greasy, but she didn't have the heart to critique his selection. "I will ensure it comes out absolutely piping hot." As she turned away, she had to navigate past Sterling Vance's territory again. "Hey, sweetheart," Sterling yelled, snapping his fingers sharply, the sound like a gunshot. "Did you get lost? We need bread, and tell your manager I want that old guy moved. He keeps staring over here. It's absolutely killing my appetite." The man was not looking at them. He was engrossed, writing meticulously in his worn notebook. He's just having his lunch, Mr. Vance, Chloe said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. He's an eyesore, Sterling sneered, leaning back and swirling the expensive liquid in his glass with affected boredom. Probably doesn't even speak English. Just nods and grunts. Look at him. It's pathetic. This place is definitely going downhill if they let just anyone wander in. He shifted his superior gaze to his colleagues, ready for his lecture. That, gentlemen, is the core problem with the entire European market right now, Sterling pontificated, ensuring his voice carried. It's old. It's dusty just like that guy. Zero innovation. That is precisely why we are going to absolutely crush them on the acquisition of Lair Pharma. The French are far too polite to fight back. They'll roll over. They always do. Chloe's hands involuntarily clenched into tight fists at her sides. She knew she shouldn't react. She desperately needed this job. Her student loans from her time abroad were crippling, and her mother's increasing medical bills were piling up mercilessly. She needed the tips. She needed Sterling Vance to remain oblivious and happy. But as she glanced back at Table 9, seeing the dignified man sipping his frigid water while the air conditioner buffeted him, something crucial inside her finally snapped. It wasn't a violent break, but a quiet, formidable resolution. She wouldn't just serve him. She would treat him like royalty. She marched directly into the kitchen. "Chef," she called out to the line cook. "Marco, Table 9, the onion soup. But please, Marco, I need you to make it the real way. Don't use the pre-made stock. Use the reserve from the short ribs." Marco, a burly, tattooed man whose neck disappeared into his chef whites, looked skeptically at her. "For whom? The VIP?" "No," Chloe said, standing firm. "For a gentleman who is having a very bad day." Marco studied her face, then shrugged, the universal sign of surrender. "For you, Chloe." "Okay. 2 minutes." She personally prepared the coffee, ensuring the delicate ceramic cup was warmed first, and placed a fresh, homemade biscotti on the saucer, a small luxury usually reserved only for the exclusive dinner service. When she returned to the floor, the atmosphere had thickened, turning even more toxic. Sterling Vance was now standing, loudly and crudely recounting a story about a debauched weekend in Ibiza, while mimicking a French accent that bordered on outright racism. The man at Table 9 had stopped writing. He was simply staring at his hands. He looked physically small. Chloe approached the table and set the coffee down perfectly. Then, she did something she hadn't dared to do in 3 long years. Not since she had left Paris in tears, abandoning a degree in linguistics and a profoundly broken heart. "Monsieur," she said softly, her voice dropping an octave, seamlessly shifting into the fluid, rhythmic, and elegant tones of a native Parisian. "Pardonnez-moi l'attente. J'ai demandé au chef de préparer la soupe spécialement pour vous. Ce sera bien meilleur ainsi." The man's head snapped up violently. The worn notebook slid slightly under his palm. The deep weariness in his blue eyes completely vanished, instantly replaced by a spark of electric, genuine shock. He looked at her, truly observed her, for the very first time. "Vous parlez français?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly with disbelief. You speak French?" Chloe smiled, and for that single, suspended moment, the noisy, demanding New York restaurant melted away entirely. "J'ai fait 3 ans d'études à la Sorbonne. Literature. 3 years studying literature at the Sorbonne." The man's face transformed instantly. It was like watching the morning sun explosively break through heavy, oppressive storm clouds. His shoulders physically dropped 3 inches. The severe tension around his jaw melted away. He wasn't just a lonely, ignored old man anymore. He was a human being who had been unexpectedly found. "C'est incroyable," he whispered, a genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "It's incredible. No one here speaks my language. They all just bark like dogs." He subtly gestured with a quick flick of his head toward Sterling's table. Chloe stifled a soft giggle. She replied quickly, using an old idiom taught by her grandmother. "Chien que boy any mord pas, monsieur." "Barking dogs don't bite, sir." Jean-Luc let out a full, deep belly laugh, a sound that finally drew curious glances from several nearby tables. Touché, Chloe. Touché. He leaned forward, his entire demeanor shifting from passive observer to keenly engaged participant. Tell me, why is a Sorbonne graduate serving coffee to... How did he call me? Papy? Life, Chloe said, switching back to English briefly as she noticed the manager, Henderson, observing their interaction with suspicion. Life is complicated. Plans change. Plans? Jean-Luc nodded sagely, his sharp eyes scrutinizing the room. Yes, I had plans for today, too. I was supposed to meet a very important man, a banker. But, he looked critically around the lavish room, his eyes hardening slightly. I think I have learned far more by sitting here alone than I ever would have in his gilded boardroom. I'm sorry they were so rude to you, Chloe said quietly, truly meaning it. Do not be sorry, Jean-Luc said, waving a dismissive hand. You learn a man's true character by how he treats those he incorrectly thinks can do absolutely nothing for him. That man, he nodded towards Sterling Vance. He thinks he is a king because he possesses a loud voice and a large bank account. But he is. Jean-Luc paused, searching carefully for the perfect French word. Un parvenu? Chloe suggested softly. An upstart, a nouveau riche climber. Jean-Luc beamed. Exactement. For the next 20 minutes, Chloe checked on him frequently. They spoke in hushed, intimate French, a private conversation shielded by a different tongue. He told her he was originally from Lyon but now lived primarily in Paris. He revealed he was in New York for an extremely delicate business restructuring. She told him briefly about her mother's illness, carefully avoiding any plea for pity. She told him how profoundly she missed the simple neighborhood bakery on Rue Lair. It was the most profoundly human interaction she had experienced in months. But the protected bubble had to burst. Sterling Vance, now aggressively fueled by 3 large glasses of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, had noticed their quiet camaraderie. He hated it. He hated that the bum was smiling. He hated that the low-status waitress was affording Table 9 more respectful attention than Table 4. Hey! Sterling roared, slamming his heavy hand onto the table. The glassware and silverware rattled violently. The entire restaurant fell into a horrified, total silence. Chloe froze instantly. Yes, Mr. Vance? She asked, turning slowly to face him. I've been waiting for the check for 5 minutes. Sterling lied aggressively. And you're over there chit-chatting with the homeless guy in some gibberish language. Is this a professional restaurant or a damn social club? I apologize, sir, Chloe said, struggling to keep her voice perfectly steady. I was merely ensuring his order was correctly prepared. I don't care. Sterling spat. He stood up, swaying slightly with the wine. He was a large man, and he purposely used his intimidating bulk, walking directly toward Chloe, deliberately invading her personal space. You know, I spend more on one lunch than you make in a month. I expect swift service. I demand respect, and I absolutely do not expect to be ignored for him. He pointed a thick, accusatory finger directly at Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc slowly, deliberately, set his coffee cup down. The ceramic made a sharp, echoing clink against the saucer. Is there a problem? Jean-Luc asked. His English was slow, heavily accented, but his tone was no longer that of a tired grandfather. It was cold. It was steel. Sterling scoffed, laughing loudly. Oh, he speaks. Yeah, there's a massive problem, Papy. You're ruining the ambience, and you... He whipped back toward Chloe. I am going to have a serious word with your manager. In fact, Henderson. Mr. Henderson rushed over immediately, his face a mask of panic and calculation. Yes, Mr. Vance. Is everything all right? No, it's not, Sterling said, adjusting his expensive tie, the picture of aggrieved entitlement. This waitress is utterly incompetent. She has been ignoring my table, a high-value corporate account, to flirt with this vagrant. It's insulting. I want her fired, or I immediately take my firm's corporate account to Lou Bernardine. Chloe's blood turned to ice. That corporate account was a guaranteed $50,000 a year for the restaurant. Henderson looked at Chloe, then decisively at the account holder. There was zero hesitation, only cold math. Chloe, Henderson said sharply, his face devoid of feeling. Go to the office. Clock out. But, Chloe started, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. Now, Henderson barked. Mr. Vance, I am so sorry. We will immediately comp your wine. Please sit back down. Sterling smirked, a look of pure, malicious triumph washing over his face. He glanced back at Jean-Luc. See that? That is exactly how the world works. Money talks. You walk. Jean-Luc stood up slowly. He was not a physically tall man, but suddenly, he seemed to dominate and fill the entire space. He picked up his worn leather notebook. He reached into the inner pocket of his tweed jacket and pulled out a single bill. A crisp, new $100 bill, and placed it gently on the small table. Keep the change, Chloe, he said softly, his deep blue eyes locked firmly on hers. And do not worry about this. He gestured broadly around the room, encompassing Henderson and Sterling. This is absolutely not the end of the story. He turned finally to Sterling. He did not raise his voice. He didn't curse or yell. He simply looked at the banker with an expression of profound, weary disappointment, like a respected professor watching a star pupil fail the most basic ethical test. You have a meeting scheduled for 3 o'clock this afternoon, Jean-Luc stated. It was a declaration, not a question. Sterling blinked, utterly confused. What? The merger. Lair Pharma. Jean-Luc articulated the words slowly and clearly, allowing the weight of the syllables to sink in. Sterling's face went instantly pale, the blood draining away. How do you know about that? That's strictly non-public information. Jean-Luc did not bother to answer. He simply buttoned his quaint tweed coat with meticulous care. I strongly suggest you are not late. The chairman is very particular about manners. With that, Jean-Luc Valois walked straight out of the restaurant. The silence he left behind was immense, heavy, and absolute. Sterling stared blankly at his analysts. Who in the hell was that? He probably just read it in the paper, one analyst suggested nervously, sweating slightly. Ignore him, Sterling. You got the girl fired. You won. Sterling sat back down, but his composure was shattered. Yeah, I won. Chloe, standing rigid near the kitchen door, wiped a solitary tear from her cheek. She untied her apron, dropping it onto the floor. She had lost her essential job because she chose to speak French, her native academic language, to a lonely old man. She grabbed her worn bag and walked out the back door into the narrow, refuse-strewn alley, finally allowing herself to sob. She did not see the formidable black Maybach sedan parked silently just around the corner. She did not see the uniformed driver holding the door open reverently for the man in the tweed coat. And she certainly did not see the man reach into his jacket and pull out a sleek satellite phone, immediately dialing a secure number. Hello, Francois, Jean-Luc said into the phone, his voice now sharp as a newly honed razor. Cancel the 3 p.m. meeting with Holloway and Finch, and immediately pull the complete personnel file for a Mademoiselle Chloe Evans from the Lorinary Restaurant Management. Yes, do it now. We have important work to attend to. Sterling Vance checked his flawless reflection in the elevator's polished brass doors. He looked immaculate. His navy worsted wool suit was impeccably sharp. His tie was a carefully chosen, aggressive power red, and his hair was sculpted with gel to geometric precision. He had successfully compartmentalized the memory of the waitress and the old man the moment he had swaggered out of Lorinary. They were simply background noise, an annoying static interference in the triumphant broadcast of his successful life. His focus was laser-sharp on one goal, closing the Lair Pharma deal. It was a respected French pharmaceutical giant, now perfectly ripe for a hostile takeover. Sterling planned to ruthlessly strip it for parts, sell off the valuable research division, and pocket a minimum 7-figure bonus. The heavy elevator doors pinged open onto the 40th floor of Holloway and Finch. Usually, the office floor thrummed with the aggressive, frantic energy of trading. Phones ringing wildly, analysts shouting jargon, the potent scent of expensive coffee and unchecked ambition. Today it was absolutely dead silent. Sterling frowned, instantly unnerved. He walked quickly past the receptionist, who refused to meet his gaze. He strode past the bullpen of junior analysts. They were huddled together in tight, whispering groups. When they saw him approach, they scattered instantly, like startled cockroaches when the lights are suddenly flicked on. "What in God's name is going on?" Sterling muttered under his breath. "Vance!" The shout originated from the corner office, the lair of power. It was Magnus Holloway, the firm's senior partner. A man who habitually chewed through thick cigars and subordinates with equal, frightening enthusiasm. Sterling adjusted his cuffs and walked in. "Magnus, I'm ready for the 3 o'clock call with the French team. I have the term sheet right here." "There is no call," Magnus said. His voice was dangerously low, a subterranean rumble. He was standing by the window, staring out at the grim, gray skyline. He turned around slowly, and his face was a shade of deep, alarming purple that Sterling had never witnessed before. "The deal is completely dead." Sterling froze mid-step. "What? That's impossible." They were desperate. "I had them completely cornered." "You had nothing." Magnus slammed his fist onto the massive oak desk, the sound echoing throughout the silent office. "I received a personal call 10 minutes ago from the executive secretary of Jean-Luc Valois. Do you know who that is, Vance?" "Valois?" Sterling frantically searched his mental database. "He's the majority shareholder of the silent partner, the Ghost. Nobody ever sees him." "Well, somebody damn well saw him today," Magnus hissed. He called to personally pull the plug on the entire merger. He stated that Holloway and Finch, and I quote, "lacks the moral architecture to manage his family's legacy." He called us, and I quote again, "a firm of uncultured barbarians led by a man who cannot distinguish a billionaire from a beggar." Sterling's stomach plummeted. The blood drained from his face so rapidly he felt lightheaded, dizzy. A billionaire from a beggar. The restaurant, the worn tweed coat, the scarf, the hateful papy insults. "Oh no," Sterling whispered, the sound catching in his throat. "Oh no is right," Magnus growled, his voice rising in fury. "He mentioned a specific incident at lunch. Something about an employee of ours insulting him while he was attempting to enjoy a bowl of soup." "Sterling, where did you have lunch?" Sterling tugged miserably at his starched collar. It suddenly felt impossibly tight. "Lorinary." "But Magnus, you don't understand." He looked like a hobo. He was sitting right by the kitchen. He was wearing a jacket from the Salvation Army. "That hobo," Magnus said, walking slowly around the desk until he was inches from Sterling's face, "is personally worth $12 billion. He is widely known for being eccentric. He likes to walk the city without security, often dressing plainly, specifically to see how people treat him. It's a test, you absolute idiot, and you failed it spectacularly. I can fix this," Sterling stammered, desperation clawing at his throat. "I'll find him. I'll apologize. I'll grovel. Just please don't take me off the account." Magnus stared at him with cold, terrifying shark-like eyes. "You have 24 hours. If that deal is not back on the table by tomorrow, close of business, don't bother coming back. You are finished in this city. I will personally ensure you can't get a job sweeping floors at a downtown bodega. I'll fix it," Sterling promised, backing clumsily out of the office. He ran for the elevator, frantically pulling out his phone to Google Jean-Luc Valois New York residence. His hands were violently shaking. He had utterly humiliated the one man who held the fate of his entire career in his quiet hands. But Sterling Vance was a survivor. He convinced himself it was just a misunderstanding. He would buy the old man a rare, vintage bottle of wine, fake the most sincere apology possible, and charm his way back in. He had never met a problem that money and smooth talking couldn't solve. He didn't yet realize that while he was fighting for his bonus, the girl he had carelessly crushed was now fighting for her very survival. Chloe sat on the cold linoleum floor of her tiny studio apartment in Queens. The air was thin, and the despair was heavy. Her bank app was open on her phone, illuminating her face with a harsh blue light. Balance, $42. She had rent due in 72 hours, $1,200. She had an electric bill due tomorrow, $85, with a threat of immediate shutoff, and she had just lost her primary source of income. a job she already hated, but one that paid. She had called Henderson, the maitre d', 3 times, begging, rationalizing, swallowing her pride until it tasted like ash. The last time, he hadn't bothered to answer. He had simply blocked her number. She knew the brutal math of the service industry. It was a small, interconnected world, ruled by whispered reputations. If Henderson blacklisted her as difficult, a troublemaker, or worse, if Sterling Vance used his immense influence to veto her, she wouldn't get a table at a diner, let alone a fine dining establishment. She would be utterly unemployable. Stupid, she whispered to herself, wrapping her arms around her drawn-up knees. Why did you have to speak French? Why did you have to be a hero? She looked up at the wall. Her framed diploma, hanging slightly crookedly, announced her achievements. University Paris-Sorbonne, Linguistics and International Relations. It was supposed to be her ticket, her golden key to a diplomatic career, a way out of the generational poverty that stalked her family. Instead, it was an expensive reminder of crushing student debt and grand, failed dreams. She had returned to New York to care for her ailing mother, and the resulting gap in her resume had become a chasm too wide to cross. The only work she could find was serving overpriced food to men like Sterling Vance. Men who used their power to dismantle the lives of those beneath them. A sharp, authoritative knock on the door made her jump, a physical jolt of fear. Panic flared hot in her chest. Was it the landlord? He usually didn't bother with decorum. He just yelled threats through the thin wood. Chloe stood up slowly, wiping the residue of tears from her eyes, and crept toward the door. She peered through the peephole. Standing in the dim, stale-smelling hallway, which perpetually smelled faintly of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes, was a man in a pristine, perfectly tailored black suit. He was wearing an earpiece, the kind seen on Secret Service agents. He held a thick, creamy envelope in both hands. The very sight of his perfection next to the peeling paint felt absurdly intimidating. Chloe opened the door a mere crack, keeping the heavy safety chain firmly latched. "Yes, Miss Chloe Evans?" the man asked. His voice was practiced, professional, and entirely devoid of any recognizable human emotion. "Who's asking?" she demanded, her voice raspy. "I have a correspondence for you. It is urgent." He held the envelope up to the gap. It was not a standard letter. It was heavy cardstock, almost rigid, sealed with a bespoke crest pressed into deep red wax. It looked less like mail and more like something delivered by a royal messenger, or a climactic plot device from a movie. Chloe hesitated. Then, with a strange fatalistic curiosity, she undid the chain and took the envelope. Its weight felt significant. Is this a summons? Am I being sued? She thought immediately, the image of Sterling Vance's sneering face flashing in her mind. Had he actually sued her for disturbing his exclusive lunch? "Quite the opposite, ma'am," the man replied, his eyes steady. "The car is waiting downstairs." "What car?" "Please read the letter." The man stepped back 2 measured paces, affording her privacy. Chloe tore open the seal, the heavy wax cracking under the pressure. Inside was a single card, thick and luxurious, featuring elegant, flowing calligraphy. Mademoiselle Evans. You offered kindness when the world offered cruelty. You offered a voice when I was silenced. Now I would like to offer you an opportunity. Please accompany my driver. Do not worry about your attire. Come as you are. Jean-Luc Valois. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs, sounding impossibly loud in the silence of the hallway. Jean-Luc. The old man. Valois. She remembered the name instantly from her studies. The Valois family was French industrial royalty, dynastic figures whose holdings included steel, global pharmaceuticals, and powerful media empires. "Is this real?" she asked the driver, her voice barely a breath. "Mr. Valois does not deal in fake gestures, Miss Evans," the driver replied, his impatience subtly conveyed by the rigidity of his posture. "We have a schedule to keep." Chloe moved on instinct. She grabbed her threadbare coat and her cheap purse. She didn't look back at the suffocating, depressing apartment. She descended the creaking stairs and stepped out onto the sidewalk, and she gasped. Parked directly in front of her tenement building, looking absurdly, impossibly out of place next to the dented, overflowing trash cans, was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. It wasn't just a car. It was a black, silent assertion of limitless capital. Neighbors, drawn by the unusual sight, were already peering out of their windows. The driver quickly opened the rear door. Chloe slid into the leather interior. It enveloped her in a cloud of bespoke scent, vanilla and expensive, subtle cologne. The silence was absolute. They drove in hushed reverence into Manhattan, the Phantom gliding through the snarling Friday traffic that usually reduced lesser cars to a frustrated crawl. They pulled up not to a hotel, but to a private residential skyscraper on Park Avenue, the kind of building where apartments were purchased solely for the storage of multimillion-dollar art collections. The elevator ride was soundless and impossibly fast, opening directly into a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor. The view of Central Park was so vast, so stunning, it felt like looking out from a cloud. Jean-Luc Valois was standing by the enormous limestone fireplace. He was no longer wearing the scruffy tweed coat. He was now clad in a tailored navy suit that fit him with architectural precision. The transformation was startling. He looked younger, sharper, and impossibly powerful. A genuine predator. "Chloe," he said, turning around with a genuinely warm smile that nevertheless contained a spark of cunning. "Welcome, Mr. Valois," Chloe managed, clutching her purse strap. I don't understand what this is. Please sit." He gestured toward a plush velvet sofa, antique and clearly priceless. "Tea or perhaps something stronger? Champagne?" "Tea is fine," she squeaked. Instantly, a maid appeared as if summoned by thought, presenting a silver tray laden with fine porcelain. "I owe you an apology," Jean-Luc said, sitting down opposite her, his manner utterly relaxed. "My little experiment at the restaurant caused you to lose your employment. That was not my intention. I underestimated the sheer pettiness of Mr. Vance." "It's not your fault," Chloe insisted, gripping the delicate teacup. "Mr. Vance, he's a difficult man, and Henderson is afraid of him. Everyone is." "Fear," Jean-Luc mused, taking a sip of his own tea. "It is a powerful motivator, yes. But loyalty, that is rare. You showed loyalty to a stranger, Chloe. You defended my dignity at the cost of your own livelihood. In my world, that is a commodity far more precious than gold." He picked up a slender manila folder from the glass coffee table. "I have looked into your background," he stated, his eyes direct and piercing. "Sorbonne graduate, top of your class. Fluent in French, Italian, and English. A thesis on cross-cultural negotiation tactics in European business. Is this accurate?" Chloe nodded, her face flushing crimson. I haven't used my degree in a long time. The market was tough when I came back. There were just too many gaps." "The market is foolish," Jean-Luc declared, dismissing the entire global financial structure with a wave of his hand. "I am expanding my operations in North America. I am acquiring several critical companies. I need someone who understands not just the language of these deals, but the nuance. Someone who can read the room. Someone who can tell a king from a fool hiding behind a tweed jacket." He slid the folder across the polished tabletop. "I want you to be my executive liaison for the New York transition. You will be my voice. You will translate, yes, of course, but you will also advise." Chloe opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was an employment contract. Her eyes instantly darted to the salary line. $12,000 per month, plus full benefits, plus a signing bonus of $20,000. She gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, a raw, involuntary sound. "Mr. Valois, I can't accept this. This is charity." Jean-Luc's face grew immediately serious, the warmth instantly replaced by cold resolve. "It is not charity, Mademoiselle Evans. It is an investment. I have a problem, Chloe. A problem named Sterling Vance and his firm Halloway and Finch." Chloe looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" They want to buy my pharmaceutical company, Valois Pharma. They think I am a senile old man. They think they can bully me into selling off vital assets. I need to teach them a lesson in respect. I need to show them that the servants they ignore are often the ones who hold the keys to the kingdom. He leaned forward, his blue eyes twinkling with a dangerous mix of mischief and cold calculation. I have rescheduled the meeting with Sterling Vance for this Friday. He thinks he is coming here to apologize to me for the inconvenience he caused. But I will not be there. You will be there. Me? Chloe's eyes widened in sheer horror. I can't face him. He terrified me. He terrified the waitress, Jean-Luc corrected, his tone absolute. He will not terrify the executive liaison of Valois Industries. We have 3 days, Chloe. We will get you new clothes. We will prep you on the deal, and on Friday you will walk into that boardroom and you will own him. Jean-Luc extended his hand across the table. So, Chloe Evans, are you ready to stop serving the soup and start owning the restaurant? Chloe looked at the contract, a path out of the abyss. She looked at the breathtaking view of the city that had systematically beaten her down for so long. She thought of Sterling Vance's smug laugh when he got her fired. She took Jean-Luc's hand. Her grip was firm, unexpectedly strong. I'm ready, Mr. Valois. The next 3 days were a whirlwind, a blur of intense preparation that felt less like training and more like a fever dream. Jean-Luc didn't just give her a job. He gave her armor, polishing her until she gleamed. Tuesday was wardrobe. Jean-Luc hired a personal stylist who had previously worked for Vogue. They didn't dress Chloe in flashy, attention-seeking colors or sequin dresses. They dressed her in power, stealth power, the kind that whispers authority. Sharp blazers in charcoal and midnight blue, silk blouses that draped rather than clung, and stilettos that clicked with measured, confident authority on the marble floors of the penthouse. You are not a decoration, the stylist, a severe woman named Camille, told her, pinning a trouser hem. You are the shark in the water. The clothes should say, I cost more than your entire life savings, but I don't need to brag about it. When Chloe looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The tired eyes were now subtly framed by sophisticated, dark-rimmed glasses. The messy bun was gone, replaced by a sleek, sharp bob cut. The stain on her sleeve from a drop tray was replaced by the immaculate drape of Italian cashmere. She stood taller, her posture correcting itself instinctively to carry the weight of the expense. Wednesday was strategy. Jean-Luc sat with her in his vast, leather-scented library for 10 brutal hours. They dissected the financials of Holloway and Finch, line by agonizing line. Here is their weakness. Jean-Luc pointed to a complex spreadsheet on the screen. Sterling Vance is deeply over-leveraged. He bet his own substantial money on this merger going through, specifically to cover bad debts he accumulated in the Asian markets. If this deal fails, he doesn't just lose his bonus. He loses his liquidity. He goes bankrupt. So we crush him? Chloe asked, her voice steady. She was learning the language of this new world terrifyingly fast. No, Jean-Luc smiled, a genuine flicker of delight in his eyes. We let him think he is winning, and then we change the rules. You must know the details of Valois Pharma's patent portfolio better than he knows his own children. Chloe studied until her eyes burned. She memorized the specific patent numbers for the cutting-edge Alzheimer's research project. She memorized the FDA approval dates. Crucially, she memorized Sterling Vance's biography, learning that he had failed the New York bar exam twice before abandoning law for finance. Insecurity, she noted in her pad. Asterisk, he overcompensates because he's not as smart as he acts. Thursday was the test. Jean-Luc invited 3 of his toughest corporate lawyers, men who charged astronomical hourly rates, to the penthouse. He had Chloe run a mock negotiation against them. First, she was timid. The lawyers interrupted her, spoke over her in condescending tones, and used complex legal jargon designed to disorient her. Stop, Jean-Luc commanded from his chair in the corner, his voice like the crack of a whip. Chloe, they are interrupting you. Why are you letting them? I wanted to be polite, she stammered. Politeness is for dinner parties, Chloe, Jean-Luc said sternly. This is war. If they interrupt you, silence them. Try again. By the end of the grueling session, Chloe wasn't asking questions. She was issuing commands. When one senior lawyer tried to question the valuation of a subsidiary, she slid a printed sheet across the table. The data is on page 4, she stated, her voice cool. Not hostile, merely factual. If you had done your due diligence, counselor, you wouldn't be asking this question. The lawyer shut up instantly. Jean-Luc clapped once, slowly. She is ready. Friday morning arrived. The sky over Manhattan was a slate gray, ominous and heavy. A convoy of 3 black armored SUVs waited outside Jean-Luc's building. Chloe sat in the middle car, cocooned in silence. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed minimalist elegance. Her lips were painted a deep, authoritative crimson. Remember, Jean-Luc said over the car's secure speakerphone as the procession moved. I am not coming in. I will be on the video link, but the screen will be off until the very end. You are the face. They are expecting a scared old man. Give them hell. Understood, Chloe said. She checked her reflection in the dark glass. She no longer saw the girl who had cried in a dirty alleyway. She saw Chloe Evans, executive liaison. The car pulled up to the imposing glass tower of Holloway and Finch. Chloe stepped out. The massive security guards who usually ignored couriers and food service staff straightened instantly and held the heavy doors open for her. She walked to the marble reception desk. I am here for the Valois meeting, she announced. Her voice was cool, clear, and naturally commanded attention. The receptionist looked visibly flustered. Oh yes, Mr. Vance is expecting, Mr. Valois. Mr. Valois is delayed, Chloe said, checking her wrist. A Cartier tank watch, a gift from Jean-Luc designated as a tool of the trade. I am his proxy. Please inform Mr. Vance that he has exactly 5 minutes to seat us, or we leave permanently. The receptionist frantically dialed a number. Mr. Vance, the Valois party is here, but it's a woman. Up on the 40th floor, Sterling Vance was pacing. He had ordered the best catering, rehearsed his groveling apology speech, and was ready to placate the old fool in the tweed coat. A woman! Sterling frowned into the phone. Probably his daughter or something. Send her in. And tell the team to stand up when she enters. We need to show respect. The double doors of the massive boardroom opened. Sterling Vance, Magnus Holloway, the senior partner, and 4 other senior partners stood up, straightening their ties and plastering on their fake, plastic smiles. Welcome, welcome, Sterling boomed, stepping forward with his hand extended, focusing only on the quality of the expensive suit. We are so honored to. He stopped dead. The woman walking in did not take his hand. She walked right past him, her heels clicking rhythmically on the polished hardwood. She placed a sleek, black leather portfolio on the head of the table, the seat traditionally reserved for the chairman. Then she turned around. She removed her designer sunglasses slowly, deliberately. Sterling blinked. He squinted. The face was familiar. The eyes. He knew those specific, intense eyes, but the context was utterly, terrifyingly wrong. This was a power player. This wasn't. Good morning, Mr. Vance, Chloe said. Her voice was the same one that had offered him the wine list just 5 days ago, but now it held the weight of a gavel sentencing a criminal. You, Sterling whispered, his brain short-circuiting. The waitress. Executive liaison Chloe Evans, she corrected him, her voice slicing through the silent room like a razor blade. And on behalf of Valois Industries, I'm here to discuss the terms of your surrender. Magnus Holloway looked from Chloe to Sterling, his face a mask of confusion and immediate dread. Sterling, you know this woman? Sterling's mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish pulled from water. She served me lunch on Monday. Chloe smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. Yes. And you attempted to have me permanently fired for the crime of serving coffee to a man you called a vagrant. A vagrant, Mr. Vance, who just happens to own the company you are desperately trying to acquire. She pulled out the chairman's chair and sat down at the head of the long table. She looked at the stunned room full of powerful, expensive men. "Please sit," she said. "We have a lot to talk about. And, Mr. Vance, if you snap your fingers at me one more time, the deal is off permanently." Sterling collapsed back into his chair, looking suddenly small, his tailored jacket hanging loose on his frame. Chloe opened her folder. "Let's begin." The silence in the boardroom of Holloway and Finch was heavy, thick enough to crush a man, and right now, that immense weight was resting entirely on Sterling Vance's shoulders. Magnus Holloway, the senior partner and co-founder, was staring at Sterling with a look that promised professional and possibly physical violence. "Sterling," Magnus said, his voice deceptively calm. "Care to explain why the waitress you fired 5 days ago is sitting in the chairman's seat holding the Valois portfolio?" Sterling wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Magnus, it's a tactic. It's a mind game. She's just a prop. Valois is senile. He probably thinks this is funny. Look at her. She doesn't know the first thing about M&A. Sterling turned to Chloe, forcing a sneer onto his face. "Listen, sweetheart. I don't know what the old man is paying you to play dress up, but the adults are talking now. Why don't you run along and get us some coffee? 2 sugars. A few of the other partners chuckled nervously, desperate to break the suffocating tension. Chloe didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She slowly opened the black leather portfolio, the sound of the thick paper sliding against the mahogany table amplifying in the quiet room. "Mr. Vance," she began, her tone conversational yet utterly icy. "It is fascinating that you mention adults, because according to the due diligence report I compiled last night, you have been managing this firm's assets with the maturity and foresight of a degenerate gambler in a Vegas casino." She slid a single, stapled sheet of paper across the table toward Magnus Holloway. "Page 1, Chloe narrated. "Mr. Vance claims that Holloway and Finch has the liquidity to purchase Valois Pharma for $4.2 billion. However, if you look at the footnotes regarding the Shadow Creek holdings in Singapore." Magnus picked up the paper, his eyes scanning it quickly. His face went instantly pale, a shock of gray against his tanned skin. "Sterling?" Magnus whispered, the calm gone, replaced by sudden fury. "What is this? You told me the Singapore accounts were solvent." "They are," Sterling squeaked, clutching at the air. "It's just a temporary cash flow issue. Once the merger goes through, we use the Valois assets to plug the hole. It's standard practice." "It is not standard practice," Chloe interrupted, her voice sharp and precise. "It is fraud. You are attempting to buy Mr. Valois' company using money you demonstrably do not have, simply to cover catastrophic debts you should never have incurred. Furthermore, your intention was to strip Valois Pharma of its research division, specifically the groundbreaking Alzheimer's project that is dear to Jean-Luc's heart, and sell it to the highest bidder just to save your own bonus." Sterling stood up abruptly, slamming his hands onto the table. "You lie. You're just a waitress. You don't understand these numbers." "Sit down, Sterling," Magnus barked. "No," Sterling yelled, his composure shattering entirely. "She's a nobody. I had her fired. She was crying in the alleyway on Monday. She's nothing." Chloe stood up slowly. She wasn't the tallest person in the room, but in that moment, she was undeniably the biggest. "Yes," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low whisper that commanded utter silence. "I was crying in the alleyway. I was terrified. I was worried about my rent. I was worried about my mother's medical bills. And do you know why? Because you, a man with everything, decided to crush someone with absolutely nothing. Just because you could. Just because you wanted to show off for your friends." She walked around the table, approaching Sterling. He actually took an involuntary step back, retreating from her quiet intensity. "But here is the lesson you missed, Sterling," Chloe continued, stepping closer. "When you push people all the way to the bottom, they learn how to survive. They learn to watch. They learn to listen. And while you were busy shouting for your wine and mocking a man's coat, I was learning that you are weak." She turned, addressing Magnus Holloway. Mr. Holloway, Valois Industries rejects your acquisition offer. Gasps went around the room. The deal was dead. However, Chloe said, raising a single finger, Mr. Valois is willing to make a counteroffer. Magnus leaned forward instantly, his eyes fixed on Chloe, ignoring the hyperventilating Sterling. What kind of offer? We will not sell Valois Pharma, Chloe said. Instead, Valois Industries is interested in purchasing the debt of Holloway and Finch. Sterling's eyes bugged out, pure terror now overriding the rage. You want to buy our debt? Specifically, your debt? Sterling? Chloe corrected, a small, chilling smile curving her lips. Jean-Luc has already spoken to your primary creditors in Singapore. They were very happy to sell your promissory notes to us at a steep discount. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Jean-Luc Valois effectively owns you. Sterling collapsed back into his high-back chair, looking as though he had been punched in the solar plexus. So, Chloe said, returning to the head of the table and sitting down with immaculate precision. Here are the new terms. Valois Industries will refrain from calling in the debt and bankrupting this firm immediately. But we have one non-negotiable condition. Name it, Magnus said instantly, already capitulating. He didn't spare a glance for Sterling. We require a change in leadership, Chloe said coolly. We cannot do business with a firm that employs, how did you put it, uncultured barbarians. She looked at the large video screen mounted on the wall. Jean-Luc, would you like to add anything? The screen flickered to life. Jean-Luc Valois was sitting in his penthouse, sipping espresso from his teacup. He looked impossibly regal, completely formidable. Good morning, gentlemen, Jean-Luc said, his voice filling the room with amplified, effortless power. And good morning, Executive Liaison Evans. You are doing a magnificent job. He turned his gaze directly to the camera, staring straight into Sterling Vance's soul. Mr. Vance? Jean-Luc said softly, his tone deadly calm. Do you remember me? I was the papy at table 9. Sterling couldn't speak. He just nodded, pale and shaking. You told me that money talks. Jean-Luc continued. You were right. My money is talking now, and it is saying goodbye. Jean-Luc looked at Magnus Holloway. Mr. Holloway, if you want your firm to survive the day, I expect Mr. Vance to be escorted out of the building within 10 minutes. Without his severance, without his bonus, and without a reference. Magnus Holloway didn't hesitate for a microsecond. The alpha shark had eaten the wounded fish. You heard him, Sterling, Magnus said coldly. Get out. But Magnus, I've been here for 10 years. Sterling stammered, his voice dissolving into a whine. Security, Magnus yelled. 2 large guards instantly entered the room, the same guards who had respectfully opened the doors for Chloe just minutes before. They grabbed Sterling by the arms. This is insane. Sterling screamed as they dragged him toward the door. She's just a waitress. You're listening to a waitress. As he was dragged past Chloe, she didn't gloat. She didn't laugh. She simply reached into the inner pocket of her expensive blazer, pulled out a crisp $5 bill, and tucked it neatly into Sterling's breast pocket. For the bus, she said softly, ensuring only he could hear her. It's a long walk to the soup kitchen. The doors slammed shut behind him. Sterling Vance was gone. The aftermath was swift. With Sterling gone, the toxic, fear-based culture at Holloway and Finch evaporated. Magnus, utterly terrified of Jean-Luc calling in the debt and bankrupting the firm instantly, agreed to every single term Chloe proposed. They signed a partnership deal that protected Valois Pharma's critical research and guaranteed ethical practices moving forward. Chloe Evans walked out of the building an hour later, stepping back into the waiting Rolls-Royce, having settled not just a business deal, but a fundamental score. Later, not as a victorious conqueror, but as a professional who had done her job. The tension that had coiled in her shoulders for the last 3 years finally began to unwind. She got into the back of the sleek, black Rolls-Royce, sinking into the plush leather seating. Jean-Luc was already there, leaning forward slightly, his face illuminated by a broad, genuine smile. You were brilliant, he said, the admiration thick in his voice, handing her a flute of exquisitely chilled champagne. The crystal chimed softly as she accepted it. I watched the whole thing via feed. The way you dismantled the Singapore debt restructuring proposal, brick by logical brick. Masterful. Absolutely masterful. I had a good teacher, Chloe smiled, tapping the rim of her glass lightly against his. The taste of the vintage champagne was a revelation, far removed from the house wine she used to sneak after her shifts. But Jean-Luc, what happens to him? Sterling. He will survive. He is a Vance after all. Jean-Luc took a slow sip of champagne, a hint of calculated satisfaction in his eyes. He shrugged elegantly. But he will have to start over. Completely. Perhaps he will find a job where he has to serve people for once, instead of manipulating them. It would be an excellent lesson in humility. Good for his soul, I think. And what about me? Chloe asked, the smile fading slightly as she faced her new reality. The deal is done. Do I go back to... Go back? Jean-Luc let out a rich, booming laugh that echoed slightly in the insulated cabin. Chloe, you just single-handedly negotiated a $4 billion corporate restructure in under an hour, protecting assets the size of small nations. You are not going back to anything, my dear. You are moving forward exponentially. I have a magnificent corner office waiting for you in Paris if you desire the glamour and the challenge of European finance. Or you can take the reins and run the entire New York branch, molding it in your own image. The choice is yours entirely. Chloe didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window. They were passing Loranie, the very restaurant where her life had become defined by anonymity and disrespect. Driver, stop, she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet luxury of the car. Is everything all right, Chloe? Jean-Luc asked, slightly concerned by her abruptness. I just need to do one last thing, Chloe said, setting down her glass. She stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, standing on the sidewalk amidst the lunchtime foot traffic. She was still wearing her impeccable charcoal power suit, the expensive wool perfectly tailored, her presence radiating a polished authority that belonged nowhere near the grease trap of a chain bistro. She looked every inch the executive, the master of her own fate. She walked through the front doors of the restaurant. It was the peak of the lunch rush, the air thick with the smell of fried food and stale coffee. Jessica, the hostess, looked up, a caustic, snarky comment already forming on her lips, ready to criticize a slow walker or a misplaced reservation. But the words died, frozen in her throat, when she took in Chloe's attire, the precise cut of her jacket, the sheer, undeniable aura of confidence and wealth radiating off her like heat. Chloe, Jessica gasped, her jaw slack. You look expensive. Chloe merely nodded, walking past her without breaking stride, the faint, lingering scent of expensive silk and success replacing the restaurant's grime. She went straight to the heavy steel kitchen doors. She pushed them open forcefully. The kitchen was a landscape of controlled, chaotic frenzy. Marco, the head chef, was shouting orders in a frustrated mix of Spanish and English, his apron splattered with various sauces, sweat plastering his hair to his temples. When he saw Chloe standing there, a perfect vision of corporate power silhouetted against the bright dining room, he stopped mid-sentence and instinctively wiped his hands on his apron. Chloe, you came back, he said, bewildered. Did you get a new job? You could say that, Chloe smiled, a genuine warmth lighting her face. Marco, do you remember that onion soup? The one you made for the difficult gentleman in the corner booth, the one with the special veal stock you kept reserved? Yeah, the French onion, sure. Why? The man who ate it was Jean-Luc Valwis, she informed him gently. He loved it. He remembered it. Marco's whisk clattered onto the stainless steel counter. His jaw dropped. Chloe continued, her voice clear above the clatter of pans. Mr. Valwis is looking for a private chef for his New York estate. Full benefits, a huge, clean kitchen to yourself, and the pay is triple what you make here. And this is the best part. You never have to cook a Cobb salad or anything off a standardized corporate menu again. Marco looked around the greasy, chaotic kitchen, the peeling paint on the ceiling, the overflowing trash cans. He looked at the manager, Henderson, who was currently yelling aggressively at a terrified busboy in the corner about spilled water. "When do I start?" Marco asked, his hands already untying the soiled strings of his apron. "Right now," Chloe grinned, the sound echoing her satisfaction. As they walked out of the kitchen together, passing the smoking fryers and the stressed line cooks, Mr. Henderson, alerted by the sudden quiet, blocked their path, his face red with indignation. "Where do you think you're going, Marco?" Henderson demanded, crossing his arms. "Get back on the line. And Chloe, you're trespassing. Get out now or I swear I'll call the police." Chloe paused. She adjusted the delicate frame of her reading glasses, a slow, deliberate movement. She looked at Henderson, not with anger, but with a mixture of immense pity and cool amusement. "Mr. Henderson," she said calmly, her voice dropping to a low, lethal register. "I wouldn't do that. You see the corporate account for Holloway and Finch, the one you fired me, publicly humiliated me, to protect because you thought I was worthless? What about it?" Henderson sputtered. "I control it now," Chloe stated simply, her gaze unwavering. "And as of this afternoon, that account is officially cancelled. Permanently. I also have a strong feeling that a lot of your other high-end corporate clients will follow suit when they hear precisely how you treat your highly skilled staff." Henderson went instantly pale, the blood draining from his face as he watched years of profit evaporate in front of him. "Come on, Marco," Chloe said, turning her back completely on the paralyzed manager. "We have a car waiting. A Rolls-Royce, actually." They walked out of the restaurant, leaving the noise, the disrespect, and the greasy servitude far behind them. Chloe climbed back into the sublime quiet of the Rolls-Royce, while a beaming, stunned Marco slid into the front seat, looking like a man who had just won the lottery. As the car pulled away, effortlessly merging into the stream of late afternoon traffic, Chloe Evans looked out at the towering city skyline. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had spoken up not just for herself and her stolen dignity, but for the man in the tweed coat, and in doing so, she had found her own powerful, undeniable voice. Jean-Luc patted her hand gently. "The bell?" he murmured softly, a quizzical look on his face. "No. La vie est belle. Life is beautiful." Chloe smiled, a genuine, deep, profound smile that finally reached her eyes. "Yes, Jean-Luc," she agreed. "La vie est belle." And that is how a clever, underestimated waitress and a billionaire taught an arrogant banker a lesson he will never, ever forget. It proves conclusively that you should never judge a book by its cover or, more importantly, a powerful person by the cheap coat they wear. Sterling Vance thought he had all the power because he had the loudest, most aggressive voice. But he forgot that true, lasting power is often silent, observant, strategic, and sometimes speaks perfect French. What would you have done if you were in Chloe's shoes? Would you have been tempted to give Sterling the money for his bus ticket, or would you have left him with nothing at all? Let me know your thoughts and insights in the comments below. If you enjoyed this satisfying story of ultimate karma and justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more stories just like this one. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new narrative. We have plenty more tales of revenge, romance, and unexpected twists coming your way very soon. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.